Claudette was no ordinary child. She was odd because she was one of the last of a long line of spider witches. She could transform into a spider-looking creature when she needed to strike an enemy. Her fiercest weapon was her venomous fangs which grew from her mouth. Her greatest weakness was her extreme temper and mood swings. Claudette was very thin and oddly pale. Her brown eyes were almond-shaped and deep-set. Her dark brown hair was long and wavy. On Claudette's 5th birthday, her mother gave her a wonderful gift. She gave her a ring she had cherished for many years. This was no ordinary ring, but a magical one. It conformed to the wearer's hand, so when Claudette put it on, it fit perfectly. The stone changed size too. The stone was very unique, oval-shaped, yellow in color, and with a black circle in the middle. It looked like a cat's eye. The ring gave the wearer the unique power to access the magic of a colony of fairies. The day after her birthday, Claudette was playing hopscotch in her backyard when her mother's cousin walked in the back gate. The cousin's name was Sybil. She didn't see Sybil very often because she lived in the United States. Sybil only came to France occasionally to spend time in her very lavish country house. Claudette and her mother didn't trust Sybil. They knew she was evil and controlling. Sybil walked over to Claudette and stood on the hopscotch pattern she had drawn on the sidewalk. Claudette stood teetering on one foot and said, "Move, Cousin Sybil, you're in my way." Sybil stared into Claudette's eyes. Then she looked at her hand and saw the ring. She laughed and grabbed Claudette's little hand and pulled the ring off her finger. Claudette screamed for her mother. The screaming enraged Sybil. She picked up Claudette and threw her into the garden well. Claudette made a splash but instantly turned into a spider creature and climbed out of the well. She ran at Sybil and jumped on her back. She screamed for her mother again and tried to insert her fangs into the back of Sybil's neck. Sybil grabbed her and threw her over the garden wall. Claudette scrambled up the wall and saw that her mother had come outside. She knew that her mother could handle Sybil. "What's going on out here?" "Oh, hello, Sybil. We haven't seen you for months." "Hello, Atraxia. I just came to get my due." Atraxia could tell that Sybil wanted to fight. Her reflex was to touch the ring that she had worn for so many years. She realized it wasn't there, and she called to Claudette, "Give me the ring!" "She took my ring and she threw me in the well." Atraxia tried to control herself and said, "You don't want to fight with me. Give the ring back to Claudette, and all will be forgotten." She gave Sybil an out, but Sybil showed Atraxia the ring on her own finger and said, "I think it looks better on me, don't you?" She glared at Atraxia. "If you want to fight, here, fight with him." Sybil calmly tapped her cane on the ground. A black image emerged and grew into a huge werewolf. He snarled and looked at Claudette. He turned to Atraxia and then to Sybil to wait for his command. "Kill her!" Sybil yelled as she pointed to Atraxia. Atraxia transformed into a spider creature as the werewolf attacked her. He ripped into her side. She hung onto him with her legs and dug her fangs into the side of his head. Claudette screamed as she watched the werewolf killing her mother. She transformed herself into a spider creature again and ran to help. She jumped on him, gouging her fangs into his neck. He stumbled from the effects of the venom. Sybil saw that he was having trouble killing Atraxia, so she calmly pulled Claudette off of him and threw her to the ground. She tried to stomp on Claudette's head, but she was too fast for Sybil. She continued to stomp and miss, but eventually she hit one of Claudette's legs. She succeeded in mutilating her knee. The werewolf collapsed and turned back into the cane. Both Atraxia and Claudette were back in human form. Atraxia drug herself over to console her crying daughter. Atraxia looked up at Sybil and cried, Why have you done this? Well, I guess for the fun of it. I was waiting for my chance to get this beautiful ring. How does it look on my finger? Atraxia was covering Claudette to protect her. She began to chant in French. Sybil became afraid and ran to Atraxia. She took her cane and whacked her on the side of the head and killed her. Claudette screamed as her mother's spirit began to leave her body in a fine mist. Sybil took an amber stone out of her pocket and forced Atraxia's spirit into the stone. Claudette continued to scream, and now she was crying for her papa. I will let you live, so you will suffer your whole life with the memory of the day that you let your mother die. Sybil turned to leave and said, Run for help, Claudette. Get your papa. Where is he? Sybil laughed as she walked out of the garden gate and left Claudette lying by her dead mother. A few minutes later, Claudette was found. A man and his wife were passing by and heard her crying. The wife stayed with Claudette so her husband could get help. The police got to the scene and she was taken to the hospital. Claudette was rambling on about how her cousin Sybil killed her mother and broke her leg. And so no one believed an obviously traumatized little girl. How could a fine, upstanding old lady kill anyone in such a way? They figured it had to be a pack of wild dogs. Claudette's father, Maurice, played the mournful husband and caring father. But underneath all that outward sadness was a cold, harsh feeling of indifference. He knew how to play the game to get sympathy. He was also indifferent to Claudette. She was kept in the hospital for an operation on her knee and for her obvious hallucinations. Her father only went to see her one time in the hospital. Soon after the funeral, Maurice moved his things into Sybil's house, and after Claudette got out of the hospital, she went to live with her Aunt Lee. Sybil had what she came to France for, the ring. So it was time for her to go back to the United States, where she was also a well-respected, rich old lady. She did get 2 bonuses. Maurice came back with her, and she captured Atraxia's spirit for her collection. The news of her father's further betrayal was kept from Claudette until she was fully able to handle it. On Claudette's 18th birthday, Aunt Lee told her about her father's running off with Sybil. From that day forward, Claudette vowed to get her mother's spirit back from Sybil and kill her and her father for his betrayal. Aunt Lee told Claudette of the extreme power Sybil and Maurice possessed, and that one spider witch could not take them down. She understood that it would take years of experience and monitoring the situation to find an opening to kill them. Almost 20 years went by before Claudette decided that the time was right to confront Sybil. All of her sources hadn't heard from Maurice for years, so they assumed that he was killed by Sybil and added to her collection of spirits, but Claudette couldn't be sure of that. She remembered that Sybil had captured her mother's spirit in amber. The more she thought about it, the more she knew that the time was now to kill Sybil. She never got her ring back, so she knew she would have to tread lightly. Over the years, Aunt Lee had told her about Sybil's American home, a mansion called Bluff House. Claudette felt that she was ready to go to America and seek her revenge. After I kill her and get Mom and my ring back, I want to move into her country house here in France. If my wonderful Papa is still with her, I may kill him too. That is, unless she hasn't already done it. Claudette packed and made reservations on the next flight to the States. She asked her aunt to go with her. 2 witches are better than 1. I'd love to go, but I taught you well. You'll be fine. Just remember, control your temper. I'll get to a hotel in Leighton and check things out before I confront her. If she already killed my father, it would be great if I could find his spirit. I'll see when I get there. I can't believe how much I hate them. Don't forget, I know, control my temper. The flight went smoothly. Claudette took a taxi from the airport directly to the town of Leighton. She knew Bluff House overlooked the Mississippi River. When she asked the cab driver if he knew about Bluff House, he assured her that everyone knew about the house and Mrs. Moore, the richest woman in that part of the state. All this news just made her blood boil all the more. While Claudette was checking into her hotel, she noticed a newspaper on the desk with a headline that read, Mrs. Sybil Moore to have dignitaries at her 100th birthday extravaganza. May I have this paper? She asked the lady behind the desk. Sure. We have other newspapers available here in the lobby. We hope you enjoy your stay with us. My name is Cora, if you need anything. I see this headline about a Mrs. Moore. Do you know where her house might be? When you drive along the Bluff Road, that's the road that runs along the river. You look up, you can't miss seeing the magnificent mansion with the grand conservatory way up on the bluffs. It's very imposing. We have a picture of it right here on the postcard rack. She took the postcard off the stand and handed it to Claudette. Only 25 cents. Well, I'll take 2. Claudette made out a card to Aunt Lee, bought the necessary stamps for the mail to France, and the clerk assured her she would post it for her. I want a room with a view of the river, she said as she put the other postcard in her purse. I love your accent, the young lady behind the desk said. Where are you from? France. I took French in high school. Good for you, Cora. Where's my key? Here's your key to room 303. We hope Madam has a good stay. Don't call me Madam. Do I look old to you? Cora stammered. Claudette mocked. Do you have a bellhop to take my bags upstairs? No, we don't, but I'll help you with them, she said, as Claudette began to walk up the stairs carrying nothing but her purse. When Claudette got to her room, she sat down and read the article about Sybil. She thought to herself, that old witch is throwing herself a 100th birthday party. I happen to know that she's more than 250 years old. This article says nothing about a husband except for her loving Mr. Moore, who the town adored. Maurice is never mentioned. I wonder what happened to my stupid father. I'm going over to this Bluff House and look around. Oh, here they say many florists, caterers, and designers have all gathered at Bluff House in preparation for the extravaganza. I should be able to snoop around in all the commotion. The party is tonight, so the old hag will be taking the whole day to make herself look presentable. I should have no problems blending in with the help, well, except for my gorgeous mink coat and the obvious limp she gave me when she crushed my knee. She felt the rage welling up inside her, and she said to herself, Remember, control your anger. Claudette went down to the lobby and asked Cora to call her a cab. One is right out there at the cab stand, madam. I asked you once, do I look old to you? Don't call me madam, she said as she walked out the door. She got in the cab and told the driver to take her to Bluff House. He drove down a steep hill and through downtown Leighton. He turned onto a brick-lined street and headed up the bluffs. He drove down tree-lined streets with beautiful homes until he came to the main gates of Bluff House. The gates were open, so he turned in and drove down the long driveway to the mansion on the edge of the bluffs. Look at all the trucks. I've driven by this place, but never actually back here, the cab driver said. Take me up to the front door. And can you wait for me? Sure, lady, I'll be here. The meter will be running. I don't care, just wait, she said as she left the cab. The front door was open, so she walked in. Men and women were rushing around getting ready for the party. Claudette stopped a woman who didn't look too busy and asked her if she knew where Sybil would keep her insect collection. The woman looked surprised at the question and told her that Mrs. Moore has a room full of taxidermy at the end of the hall. Have you seen Mrs. Moore today? She asked the lady. No, not at all. Claudette looked around and thought, I can't believe that old witch has been living like a queen all these years. She saw a room at the end of the hall with walls covered in all kinds of animal heads, even an elephant head above a very ornate fireplace. The middle of the room had very expensive leather furniture, and the far end had several display cases. Claudette began to talk to herself. I must find my mother. Maybe she's in one of these display cases. Can I help you? The lady who had given her the directions to the room asked. No, why do you ask? I thought I heard you talking. Oh yes, I talk to myself all the time. The lady left the room and Claudette continued to look around. She finally saw a display case with a collection of amber. There you are! I can't believe she has your spirit displayed like a bug. She put her hand on the glass and a perfect circle disappeared over the amber. She picked up her mother's stone, kissed it, and magically attached it to the collar of her coat as a brooch. And she said, I've got to kill that hag. I swear I will. Mom, I'll be back here. She boldly walked down the hallway, left the house, and got in the cab. Did you get to talk to Mrs. Moore? The driver asked. I got what I came for, most of what I came for anyway. Take me back to the hotel. She got back to her room and thought, the party is tonight, and I'm tired. I think I'll let her have her party, and tomorrow I'll devise a plan to kill her and capture her spirit in my black opal. She touched the opal on her necklace and thought, and last but not least, I will finally have my fairy ring back, even if I have to bite off her finger to get it. Claudette fell asleep around 9:30 that night. She was only asleep for a few minutes when she was awakened by loud explosions. She put on her robe and went down to the lobby just as a person yelled, Come look! Fireworks! She went outside and saw fireworks coming from the direction of Bluff House. Oh, the party, she thought, and she went back upstairs. Soon after, it felt like they were having an earthquake and sirens were everywhere. She got dressed and went to the lobby. The clerk on duty was outside watching the scene, so she went outside too. Something's on fire, something big, the clerk said. Claudette told the cab driver to stop gawking and drive her up to Bluff House. He drove up into the neighborhood, but couldn't get very close to the mansion. She got out and walked the rest of the way. Soon she found herself on the street, standing with a huge crowd just outside the mansion's gates. She went through the crowd asking people what happened. One man said an ambulance took Mrs. Moore out of the house. Then it caught on fire. Then it caved in. Claudette felt a little dazed. She wondered if the old hag had planned the whole thing. I wonder if someone beat me to her. To do all this destruction, they would have had to be pretty powerful. I'll find out in tomorrow's newspaper. I have to get out of here and find my cab, she thought. Early the next morning, she went down to the lobby to find a newspaper. She read all about the mystery of the destruction of the house, which she didn't really care about. The headline that concerned her the most was, Mrs. Sybil Moore, beloved First Lady of Leighton, dies at her 100th birthday party. Claudette was furious. Somebody did beat me to it. She found the funeral parlor information from the article. She was determined to get the ring off her finger in the spirit of the dead old lady. The day of the showing, she planned to pay Cousin Sybil a visit at the funeral parlor. The day of the showing, Claudette had the cab driver take her to the funeral parlor a few minutes early. She walked to the front entrance, and the double doors flew open as she approached. She was sure of herself, and even though she limped, she entered the building as if she owned the place. A man in a black suit approached her and said, What is your business here, madam? Where's Sybil Moore? She screeched as she glared at him. Madam, she's in the chapel. The showing isn't for another 45 minutes. Are you a member of the family? Well, yes, I am, Claudette said in a sickening sweet voice. Her demeanor changed and she sneered. Is there no other family here to mourn the old witch? Madam, please, we must have respect for the dead. She was a very well-respected person in this community, with many friends. Really? Where are they? We think it's the weather, madam. Sybil began to lose control. Don't call me madam. Do I look old to you, Mr. Undertaker? Yes, madam. No, miss, he stammered. She's in there. He pointed to an open door down the hall. Claudette glared at him, and then she smiled and gained control. She turned, walked down the hall, and finally, there was the old hag. The casket was white and gold and surrounded by flowers. The top half was open, and the bottom half of the casket was completely draped in white roses and baby's breath. All of Sybil's clothes went down with Bluff House, so she was put in the same dress she died in. Her dress was in pristine condition, except for some singed lace. The undertaker put white shoe polish on the singed parts of the lace, so it looked fine. She looked peaceful. The undertaker made sure that Sybil wore her signature long pearl necklaces. The necklaces made the undertaker nervous because they were very expensive, and he was responsible for their safekeeping. Claudette entered the room and threw up her hands. Look at this spectacle. I wish my mother could see this. Doesn't she look peaceful? She sneered as she stared at Sybil's face. She grabbed Sybil's hand and screamed, Where's the ring? She pulled the black opal out of her pocket and she began to chant and wave the opal over the body. She didn't have any luck collecting Sybil's spirit. Darling cousin Sybil, I found my mother in your amber collection. Eventually, I'll find my father's spirit. I heard you brought him here to America. You thought he would love you. She screamed with laughter. I figured you killed him too. He's why you killed my mother and left me with a broken knee. He just wanted your money, you old fool. She waved the opal over the body again, trying to find Sybil's rotten spirit. I knew you would do something huge for your 100th birthday in this body, so I came all the way from France to make you pay for what you did to me and my family. I was staying in a hotel just a few blocks from your precious Bluff House. I bet you were so surprised when it was swallowed up by the earth. Claudette slapped the face of Sybil's dead body. Wake up, old lady, she said in a very calm voice. I wish I could have been there. I can't have come all this way and not take your black soul back with me. I knew you would stay in this old hag's body just to see who shows up at your funeral. Are you waiting for me? Do you want me to be your host body? Where are you? She screamed. Claudette unlatched the bottom half of the casket and flung it open, sending the flowers to the floor behind the casket. She transformed into the spider witch. Her neck elongated and her head appeared to be perfectly round. Her arms grew longer than her mink coat sleeves. Her legs grew longer, but the left leg was visibly longer than the right one. Her arms and legs were bent spider-like as she climbed on top of the casket. She looked a horror, with her very round head and distinct fangs protruding from her mouth. She grabbed the pearls around Sybil's neck and pulled her into a sitting position with superhuman strength. You stiff hag. You left your body already and took my ring. She shook the body so hard the pearl strands broke in several places. She sensed the undertaker was coming back, so she transformed back to a human. But she was still in the casket, on top of Mrs. Moore. Madam, what are you doing? Get out of there. I've called the police. You're desecrating the body. She put her hand out, and the man was picked up and flung out of the room. Nobody calls me madam, she screamed. She ran after him. Did you take her ring off? She never took her ring off. He was shaking with fear and said, When she was brought here, she wasn't wearing a ring. I'm looking for a ring with a large yellow stone and a black circle in the middle of the stone. Maybe it fell off in the casket, he said. She turned and ran back to the casket, and the man ran out of the funeral home. She picked up the body and tossed it to the floor. She searched the casket, tearing the lining out and the pillow to shreds. You hag, she screamed. She grabbed Sybil by her long, braided hair and spun her around and around over her head. She transformed into the spider creature again. She screamed with hate and threw Sybil's body out through a window. Claudette calmed down and looked human again. She walked to the funeral director's office and opened the safe, but nothing was inside but some papers. While she was searching the desk drawers, she heard a siren outside. She strutted out the front doors and realized the taxi had left her. The police yelled for her to put her hands up. She smiled at them and slowly raised her hands above her head as though she were a ballerina, and she disappeared. Claudette reappeared a short distance from the funeral parlor. She walked to a busy street and hailed a cab. When she got back to the hotel, she confronted the cab driver who had left her. He said, "I saw the cops coming, so I got out of there." She stared into his eyes, touched his shoulder, and chanted a spell for him to forget what he had witnessed. And then she said, "I don't know what you're talking about. You haven't left your stand all day, and I haven't left my room all day, right?" He looked puzzled and said, "What? Oh, well, may I take you somewhere?" "No, I have things to think about," she said as she went inside the hotel. Up in her room, she laid on the bed to think. Should I attend the funeral? No, the undertaker will recognize me. There has to be a will. I'll find out where the reading of the will is going to be held. Whoever shows up there may have my ring, or they may be inheriting it. If her spirit took over someone else's body, she will probably be the one who inherits everything. So then Sybil can go on with all her riches in another body with a new name. But Bluff House is gone. She still has my fairy ring, and I want her house in France. She owes me. She looked at the newspaper on her desk and saw that a nosy reporter put the time of the reading of the will and the location. Wonderful. I'll be there. The next day, Claudette waited down the street from the attorney's office and watched several people going in for the reading of the will. Look at all the people who think they're going to get a piece of that old witch's money. I'm going in and listen at the door, she thought. May I help you, madam? My cousins are in there. They want me to come for moral support. We are mourning, you know. Wow, she's really dishing out the money, Claudette thought. Okay, here comes the good part. The attorney read, I leave the rest of my estate, including Bluff House and all its contents, all my priceless collections, all my jewelry, my private plane, all my business holdings, my house in France, and all bank accounts to Francesca McKinney. Claudette thought, who in the world is Francesca McKinney? She looked in the door and could tell by her reaction who Francesca was. I wonder if the old hag took over her body. We'll soon find out. The attorney continued. Unfortunately, Mrs. Moore didn't believe in insurance for her home and its contents. The priceless art, jewels, and collections of all kinds were destroyed with Bluff House. She was very extravagant with her money. Her jewelry and collections were worth millions of dollars. The house is gone, and even the land it stood on is gone. Mrs. McKinney, this velvet bag contains the broken pearl necklaces Mrs. Moore wore every day. This is all the jewelry that's left. Investors are pulling out of some of her companies, so we estimate the estate to be worth about $1 million. That includes her plane and house in France. Her estate is currently being sued by the fireworks company, musicians, decorators, caterers, and florists, not to mention the funeral expense. The bill for the flowers alone is more than $1,000. We had to cancel the horse-drawn carriage she requested due to the weather. Francesca spoke up. I almost forgot someone at the tragedy found this bracelet on the ground by the road. The bracelet was turned in to me. I recognize it as one of Mrs. Moore's better bracelets. Well, the bracelet belongs to you now, Mrs. McKinney. I can't imagine how this bracelet got out to the road, the attorney said. Claudette had heard enough. She walked into the room very calmly and introduced herself. She said her cousin Sybil had promised her a ring. I will also be suing for Sybil's house in France. The house is rightly mine, but for now, I want the ring. She reached out to shake all the women's hands to see if they were wearing the ring. Mrs. McKinney, do you remember seeing Sybil wearing the ring during her last day? Claudette asked. She always wore the same yellow ring with the black circle in the center. It reminded me of a cat's eye. That's the one. You see, it's been passed down in our family, and it has a lot of sentimental value. I'm sure you would want a family member to have it. Is it in the velvet bag? Well, here's a bowl. Mrs. McKinney, you can empty the contents in here if you like, the attorney said. I believe the contents are pearls only. She emptied the contents, and Claudette searched desperately for the ring. There's no ring in here, she yelled. A few people who had come for the reading of the will hurried out the door. They didn't want any part of the confrontation happening in the room. I was there when she died, Mrs. McKinney said. She was feeling sick. Some men took her upstairs to lie down. Claudette interrupted. Why didn't the pearls go down with the house? She was wearing them when she died. You can have the pearls. They're worth a lot of money. How about the bracelet you were talking about before I came in? Wait a minute. The attorney began to question the validity of Claudette's claims. You're not mentioned in the will. You'll have to contest it. Can you prove you have ties to Mrs. Moore? I know what she was planning. You may as well all know. You're the one she left almost everything to. I figure she wanted to possess your body. You fit the profile perfectly. That's why she left it all to you. She was leaving it to herself. How perfect is that? Something must have gone wrong. Claudette took Mrs. McKinney's hand and stared into her eyes. What are you doing? Mr. McKinney said. Get away from her. Claudette chuckled and pushed him across the room. That's enough, an elderly woman shouted as she stood up. Suddenly, dozens of fairies appeared behind the woman, and time froze, so that only the elderly woman, Claudette, and one other woman knew what was going on. Claudette felt cornered. She was definitely outnumbered. The ring is gone. It doesn't exist anymore. When Sybil died, she did try to possess Francesca McKinney. We intervened, and Sybil was personally escorted to hell, along with her granddaughter and the evil captives she had collected. Francesca has no idea what's going on, the elderly woman said as she stared into Claudette's eyes. I recognize you. You're the woman from the game room at Bluff House. I gave you directions to the room. Remember me? Another woman said. So you ladies beat me to Sybil. I don't get the satisfaction of killing her. Do you know if she killed a man named Maurice? I'm looking for him too. I'm sure she did. No one crossed her and lived. The fairies unfroze time in the room, and the secretary came in and said, Excuse me, the police are here, and they want to talk to this woman. Claudette poured the pearls into the velvet bag. She saw a door at the far end of the room and left. Miss, that's a closet, the attorney said. When the police came in, the attorney pointed to the closet door. They went over to it, opened the door, and rifled through the coats. She was gone. Sybil appeared a couple of blocks away and flagged down a cab. She told the driver to take her to the city cemetery. She was determined to get her revenge. She told the driver to wait for her. He was obliging. She went in the iron gates and looked around. She couldn't help but see the huge Moore mausoleum. Before she went in, she scanned the cemetery for people. Down in the lower section of the cemetery, people were gathering for a funeral. She went in the mausoleum to look around. She touched one of the white roses in a large basket in the hall, and all the flowers dried up and turned brown. As she walked to the end of the long hall where the Moors were entombed, she killed all the flowers in the baskets along the way. At the end of the hallway, she said to herself, All this grandeur for only 2 people. She walked up to the wall where the caskets were entombed behind bronze plaques, and she read out loud, Alistair Moore, a great man of Leighton. It should say, the biggest sucker who ever lived in Leighton. She paused for a second and then read, Sybil Moore, loving wife of Alistair, a great lady of Leighton. It should say, the biggest murderous witch of Leighton. Sybil took her fingernails and completely scratched out the words on Sybil's plaque and carved witch over the scratches. She pulled the plaque off with ease and pulled out the casket. She opened it up and tossed the body of Sybil to the side. She put the casket back in the wall and sealed the plaque back over the hole with heat from her hands. She got a good strong hold of one of Sybil's feet and dragged her down the hallway to the doors. She stood near the doors and turned around and looked down the hallway. She stomped her right foot on the floor, and the marble floor cracked in half. The crack went all the way to the stone wall and up to Sybil's plaque. Claudette turned and went outside, still pulling Sybil. She looked around to make sure no one was watching. She grabbed Sybil's foot with both hands and spun her around twice, flailing Sybil around, and tossed her onto the mausoleum roof. Sybil landed on the flat part of the roof so no one could see her. Claudette turned to leave. She strutted out the cemetery gates, got in the cab, and went to the hotel. She felt her luck had run out, and it was time to get back to France. She got her mother's spirit and her revenge on Sybil at the graveyard. She knew the woman at the attorney's office had powers far superior to hers, and she was content with what she had accomplished. That's not saying that she will never be back if she hears that her father's spirit has been found, but she knew that anyone who could capture Sybil's spirit and send it to hell is a person she did not want to tangle with. She knew that person had the yellow ring, and she really didn't care anymore, just as long as Sybil didn't have it. When she got back to the hotel, she told the cab driver to wait. She grabbed her luggage, paid her bill, and headed for the airport. The whole way, she felt as though she was being watched. As she boarded the plane, she looked back and saw some fairies on the roof of the airport. She smiled and waved goodbye to them. They waved back and watched her plane leave. She sat in the plane and placed her hand on the amber brooch and sighed. Claudette is a character from the book Molly O'Neill, The Kaleidoscope, Bluff House, and the Fairy War. To see how Claudette is involved with Molly and her family, check out Book 3. Written by Pamela Gillette. Linked below. Thanks for listening.